So if you work long hours, if you're in some form of a senior role within your profession or you're an entrepreneur, then you know that your life needs to be very adaptable. So then it really makes no sense to have a training plan that's very rigid, right? And this is what I see all the time. I see really obsessed but very well qualified health and fitness professionals giving out fitness plans to people as if they were athletes or college students with all the time in the world to execute these very detailed plans of, training 5 to 6 days a week, spending, 90 minutes to 2 hours in the gym every time, taking into account recovery, supplements, meal prep, all of this stuff, which is fine if you are an athlete. It's fine if you are a college student. Not so fine if this is being marketed at high performers, busy professionals, all of these terms that you see thrown around by fitness coaches now, especially on platforms like YouTube, LinkedIn, etc. That would be a top-down style of coaching where you get, the perfect cookie cutter bodybuilding plan, the perfect diet, and with all the perfect macros, and then it becomes like a part-time to actually a full-time job to try and maintain that lifestyle. You're going to need a very different approach. You're going to need an approach that is much more of a bottom-up approach where, yes, there are certain overarching principles at play when it comes to fitness and nutrition, but we don't need a strict, rigid rule set. And it's this rigidity, I think, that's the big problem. Because if you're just being given some kind of fitness plan where there's no contingency plans, there's really no account being taken into travel or changing circumstances, there's no room for you to adapt, then what really are you paying for? I mean, you are paying for a cookie cutter plan in that instance, but actually paying more for the privilege because it's being marketed at individuals like yourself who typically earn that little bit more money. If, on the other hand, you were to go with an approach that is built around a framework and certain guiding principles, then we're left with a possibility to actually create multiple instances of the plan. We can have contingency plans, and we basically come to the realization that there are thousands of ways to get you from your starting position to your goal. In fact, I would actually say that there are literally countless ways. There are enough methods that you could go through your whole lifetime and not be able to reach the full breadth of options that are available to you when it comes to long-term fat loss, building muscle mass, and having an overall healthy body. And I think that the rigid plans ultimately come from a place of a lack of depth of understanding in how fat loss and muscle mass and all these goals actually work, right? So for example, let's imagine I have a client who is, they've got a lot of time on their hands. I could give them a plan where they are in the gym 5 days a week and they are doing a push-pull split, which is then rotating into the following week. So they're basically training 6 times over 8 days, right? And then they have 2 days to recover within those 8 days. We've got them tracking their macros, hitting a high protein number. Maybe they're consuming 180 grams of protein per day. But then let's contrast that with somebody who, let's say, is working 60 hours a week. They've got a very demanding career. And this person is also on the road quite a lot, okay? Now, I'm going to take that 5-day training split, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, okay, well, within the 5-day training split that we had in the other client, right? What kind of movements are we doing? Are we doing horizontal pushing, for example, for the chest? Are we doing some form of an incline push? Are we doing some form of shoulder adduction, right? For example, for hitting the chest. How many sets are we doing per body part per week? What's their caloric intake? How much are we looking to lose within a given time frame? And then we're going to adjust all those different metrics, right? And we're going to create a plan for the person who works 60 hours a week, which might look something more along the lines of training 3 times a week, having contingency plans for when they're traveling or when they have a particularly busy week. It's going to look very different, but it's still going to hit the same requirements. What we're essentially doing is we're extending the timeline of the goal, because obviously they're not going to get into the same shape in the same time as the person who's training 5 days per week. They can still hit the same goals. It's just going to take that little bit longer, right? Similarly, we're also going to make sure that our overall training volume on our body is that little bit lower, okay? So we're going to have to reduce redundancy in the training plan. We're not going to be adding in multitudes of different chest exercises. We're probably going to have one big hitting push exercise, and then we'll have one big hitting shoulder adduction exercise, okay? So an example of that might be incline dumbbell press, and then some form of either cable fly or machine fly, okay? I'm going to get that person having shorter rest times than the guy who's training 5 days per week. I'm going to get him to incorporate supersets, drop sets, higher rep ranges where it makes sense, so that we can still accumulate quite a nice, considerable amount of volume in a very time efficient way where we're also reducing redundancy, okay? That's just one example of how you can take a more rigid training plan and then adapt on the fly for somebody who doesn't have quite as much time to spare. If you'd like me to work with you one-on-one to help you create a training plan that is bottom up and is actually fit around your lifestyle, the first step I would say is to actually just get on my mailing list, because I give plenty of tips there about how you can do just that and set up an ecosystem of fat loss habits long-term using the flexible fat loss framework. You can actually download that framework, which is part of signing up to the mailing list. There's a link in the description. And that will show you exactly the overarching framework and the principles that I use with my clients, so that we can take somebody who has a certain goal, okay, let's say 10 kilos of fat loss in 12 weeks, and we can make that happen, also while maintaining lean muscle mass in a way that actually adds to your work, doesn't detract from it, okay? Stick around for future videos, make sure to sub to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one.